Hello, the initiated. My name is Markus, Junnikkala, and this is the Be a Better Artist podcast. In this episode, we're going to talk about burnout because I think I might be going through one right now. For the past maybe month or maybe a bit longer, I have been going through multiple days of pretty much complete energy depletion. Now, for those of you who have been following the podcast or have been on the channel for longer, you know that I've had some health issues for many years now. And while I do think that most of the strain that is put on me due to my health issues is really the primary driver here, despite that being the case, I thought we would still explore another aspect to burnout, which is the mental side, the perceptional and the expectational side. Because while I do feel quite depleted due to my health, I want to focus on the things that I can control and the things I can improve. I have certain perspectives on different situations in life that are draining my energy. And also I have certain expectations about how those things are going to go. And when they don't go that way, that also drains your energy. We always seem to come back to expectations on this podcast, but it is a very big centerpiece when it comes to improving your mental state or your mental health, or improving your character, or attempting to become wiser. So the very first thing I want to touch on is that the very basic concept of energy depletion still applies. One of the things that I've learned about stress, again, from the gym, from working out, is that your body is not tremendously good, if at all, capable of identifying the type of stress that it's receiving. And what I mean by that is that there is basically a bucket, and that bucket is your body's ability to take in stress and handle that stress. And if you keep pouring stuff into that bucket, at some point it's going to overflow and then you're going to fall apart. And this has been a very difficult thing for me to come to expect because expectations. I expect more from my body. Like, surely the body is smarter than that. Like, if I go and work out and I lift weights, surely my body understands that's just physical stress, and let's put that in a department. And if I have an argument with somebody I care about in my life, that's a different type of stress, and that goes in the mental component. It doesn't seem like the body really handles the situation that way. Stress is stress, and it can come in dump loads or it can come in little tiny droplets. It seems like that's how your nervous system works. It's super fast and efficient, but it's kind of dumb in that sort of a generalized sense, which ultimately makes sense if you know a bit about the nervous system. But my point here, why I bring this up, is to recognize and acknowledge the basic principle, the basic baseline of stress, and therefore of burnout. Because there's also another bucket. If you just keep pulling energy out of the energy bucket and putting it in the stress bucket, and now you're running out of energy and you're overflowing the stress bucket, you can see how you can fall apart really quickly. Now, obviously, your body does recover, so the energy bucket gets filled up to a certain extent, to a certain amount every single day, depending on how you sleep, how you eat, how you exercise, how you socialize, or how you do any of the other activities that are beneficial for you. But you cannot keep zipping out more energy than what you recover, because if you do that, you begin to fall apart. So it's really essential that we recognize that basic principle. There's no way around that basic equation, that basic math. You need to recover so that you can exert that energy, so that you can perform to whatever standard you have for yourself, so that you may do the things that you want to do. Now, with that being said, let's move on to the mental side of things. Now, if we explore the mental side of burnout, there is no way around expectations. We have to talk about expectations because it's really one of the key things to life. Now, if you've been listening to this podcast for any significant amount of time, you know that I'm big on having as few expectations as you possibly can have. Now, for some of you, that might sound unhealthy or crazy. And I'm not saying you should live a life without expectations, but I am saying that you should be very rigorous in your assessment in where you place those expectations and on whom. I think it's a good idea to have a social core in your life. I think it's probably for most people best in the form of building a family. So having a close partner in your life, a life partner, a husband or a wife. And also, I think it's a good thing to have kids. And I certainly think for the sake of kids, you should have expectations that you place on your partner, and they should be doing the same to you so that you may be the best parents you can be for your kids. And also, you're responsible for raising your kids, so you should place expectations on them for their own sake so that they may perform in life to a certain standard, net beneficial thing for them in life. And also, going back to your partner, you presumably want what's best for them. So you should want them to have certain expectations on you because you are a big part of who and what is responsible for the positive things in their life, just like they should be for you. So there should be expectations there, but they should be mutually agreed upon, which brings us to communication, because most people have expectations that are not based on anything. They have a friend, they have a business partner, they have a coworker, and this is also very common in parent and child relationships. I'm meaning your parents. They have expectations towards you and you have towards them, yet most of those expectations are actually never discussed. So people just do things and both parties get disappointed because they had this expectation of what the person was supposed to do that wasn't really based on actually anything. You, of course, have your own values that you want to impose on other people, but you never had a proper sit-down conversation with them about what it is that they expect of you and what you expect. And instead of having those conversations, we took the easy path of taking moral high ground and saying, oh, well, these are the right things and they're supposed to know what to do. And if they don't know what those things are and they're not doing them, that's their fault. And I'm justified in my lashing out to them or whatever else. And that's the easy path to take because having difficult conversations is really difficult because we don't know the outcomes of them. And because we're afraid of what those outcomes are going to be, we rather not take the chance. Of course, we also don't realize that that's a far more dangerous and damaging path to take, at least in the long run. But as we often do, we take the easy, short path instead of the more difficult and fruitful one. And a lot of people expect things from their friends. They're supposed to do X, Y, and Z. While again, you never had proper discussion about that. I think people should have discussions about their friendships, although I understand that makes a lot of people very awkward and they think that would be just super weird to do. But I don't think it's any weirder than never talking about these things and then having those expectations and then behaving like a small child when you don't get what you want or when the other person doesn't magically do the thing that you want them or expect them to do. Most people don't read minds as of yet. And it's simply unreasonable to expect people to know exactly what it is that you want and need, wish for, if you never talk about it. Now, taking expectations back to the context of a burnout is that all of us have an idea of how it is that life is supposed to go, what it is that we're supposed to be deserving of, what's supposed to happen at our workplace or at our work, our job, whichever it may be, in our relationship, with our friends, with our parents, with our kids, with our neighbors, with our communities, with the people at our hobbies, let's say. And if you bring these expectations to each and every single one of those contexts every single day, and those expectations are not met, there's going to be disappointment here. And if you slog through your life every single day like this, having this idea of what's supposed to happen, and then once you get there, when the rubber meets the road, it doesn't happen. and you're going to be disappointed and you're going to get angry and you're going to get frustrated. It's no wonder that you're running out of energy. It's no wonder that you're dropping bucket loads of stress into that stress bucket and it's going to overflow. And again, a lot of people are going to say, well, it's not my fault. These expectations are completely reasonable because I've been thinking about these things and I've been doing my research and I know how it is that people should behave in each and every single given situation and circumstance. And because those people don't do those things, it's not my fault that I'm mad. It's their fault for not doing the right things. I'm completely justified and reasonable in my approach. And of course, I think this is a very dangerous position to occupy. I think it's full of ego. I think it's full of hubris. I think it is wise to assume that you don't know everything, that there is a better way of doing things out there, and simply that there are a multitude of ways of doing certain things because we have different values. We have different hierarchies of values in our life. One person emphasizes one approach and another a different one. Both can be right in the context of how they want to set up their life. But when we put those against one another, next to one another, and we say in our mind that there needs to be a solution to this, which one is right, and we want to impose that perspective on other people, that's when you find yourself in a difficult spot. And I do think there are correct and true solutions to individual problems. I'm not like an endless relativist in that sense. But a human life is very vast and rich and complicated, and there are multiple facets of things in life. And I think many of those facets are not do or die issues. I think there are a few do or die issues in life, but a lot of the time I see people being willing to die on a hill that is a very, very small hill in the scope of a life. And mostly this is because people are desperately looking to justify their own life decisions. They have this immovable fear of getting it right, that instead of actually exploring whether they are getting it right and testing it for themselves and finding it out for themselves, actually figuring out exactly how it is that you want to assemble and structure your life. Instead of doing that, people begin to attack the life choices of other people. And that becomes their focus. That becomes the game that they play. So what should you do instead of taking these expectations into anything and everything in your life and not seeing them fulfilled and getting exhausted as a result of that? Well, I think at least one thing is trying to meet people where they are, trying to meet people on their terms and where they are in their life. Because again, most people go into situations looking for something that they want. They want other people to fulfill exactly what it is that they want to get out of a situation. People meet somebody, they assess, what can I get from this person that is good and beneficial for me? And then they start working towards that. And either the person is fulfilling that process for you, either they are giving you what you want, or they're not. And then you're probably going to ditch that person or fade them out. So instead of doing that, try meeting people where they are. Now, in terms of where they are, that can mean multiple different things, many basic things in terms of age and education, intellect, wisdom, experience, the development of their character. They might have varying levels of social skills. But if you open yourself up to even a glimpse of that diversity that people can hold, people will surprise you and they will teach you a lot of things. And people are far stranger than what we tend to typically think. Because once you break through the ice and you get a glimpse under the hood, you can see that there's some weird shit that people are interested in, and their life stories are super, super strange once you start digging in there. And I truly do believe that every single person has something to teach you. Now, that lesson might come in many different forms. It's not always wisdom or ideas. And sometimes it's not even something that that person intentionally wants to teach you. But if you're open to that person, you can see certain patterns and you can learn from their life without them actually consciously teaching you. But I think most people have some kind of a piece of knowledge or an experience that you haven't had. And if you're open to meeting people where they are, people will recognize that, because it's actually, unfortunately, very rare. In fact, if you do this, you're probably going to notice at first that people are quite untrusting about that, because it is so rare. And they start to think that there's some weird agenda here. You're trying to manipulate them somehow, or get them into some kind of a scheme, or, make them drop their shield or their armor, and then you're going to go in for the kill or something. It's really interesting to see people recognize that, and seeing people respond to authentically being interested in other people. But if you approach life and people with an open mind, now you're open to life as a whole, and you can enter different sort of spaces and situations and letting them unfold as they are, instead of going there with your expectation and your preparation, and this is what you are, and this is what I am, and this is what I want to get out of it, and this is how the situation is going to go, and this is how I want it to go. And it's like, you can't live like that. You're in this sort of a mental prison continuously, and it's going to eat you alive. So again, openness is a gift. And since this is the Be a Better Artist podcast, many of you probably are creatives, and you've been gifted a talent or a quality of openness. And even if we are creative and open temperamentally, we still fall into the holes of getting obsessed and becoming absolutely sure that we know how things should go in each of these situations. Just because you're creative doesn't mean you are not going to fall into this trap. Every single temperament, every single type of a person can and often will fall into this trap. But you as a creative can repurpose your creative skill. And imagine you take the openness you have in a musical session, or in a writing session, or in dancing class, or painting, or whatever it is that you do. Think about that state that you have when you're doing your creative work, and how you're capable of pushing things to the side and seeing something as it is, seeing this open canvas and being open to the possibilities. If you can take that same thing to people and let go of your expectations, then you can see these situations and these people as who they truly are. And you will save a lot of energy and hopefully not burn out. Now, also relating to bringing these expectations to these different situations and people is that don't lie to yourself, because there are also people who go through life, they have expectations, but they never show them, or they deny them as much as they can. For me, the most common experience is that a person has an expectation, and then they are grumpy and moody and annoyed, and that's not great. But at the very least, you are showing your true experience within to the outside world. I don't think that's great. And again, I suggest you do what we discussed instead. But there are also some people who are they're working really hard to be better, and they don't want to show certain dissonance to the outside. Now, while that is very noble and commendable in terms of not dumping your shit on other people, it doesn't change the dissonance on the inside. It doesn't change that you are eating yourself alive. And these people go through life and they keep smiling, they keep appearing to be happy, they want others to be happy and at least have the perception of you having a good time. And oftentimes these people can do things for other people, which in principle is a wonderful thing. But if the output of those actions doesn't result in things that you actually expect, or they don't match with your inner values, then this is a problem. And while you might be making other people in your life happy, you're making yourself miserable and exhausted. And you're probably building up quite a bit of a mental health issue with this, because you're just doing things for other people and not for yourself. And eventually this is going to not only come and bite you in the ass, but it's going to bite everyone else also in their asses, because there's only so much and so long that you can keep doing this. Eventually you're going to break down and crumble, and then those people have to pay the price or pick up the pieces. And I know it's very difficult for this type of a person to make the change for themselves. They are genuinely so interested in the well-being of other people that they probably won't do it for themselves. But if you're not going to do it for yourself, do it for those other people. Because like I said, eventually when you break down, because you've been doing things for other people your entire life and never for yourself, and that's going to lead to a burnout or in most cases something even worse, that's going to be a problem for those people. So if you care about them, care about yourself. Take care of yourself. Because if you're falling apart, that's not going to be great for those people either. Of course, not practically, but if they care about you truly, then that's obviously going to be devastating for them as well. Now, obviously, the fear relating to that is, well, if I stop doing the nice things, will these people stop caring about me? And if they do, I would question their position and worth and value in your life altogether, because if they're only there because you're doing nice things for them, I don't think that's a sufficient basis for a relationship. Now, again, I don't know what the situation may be for you specifically, but again, if it's only you doing things for them, then that's a very sort of parasitic relationship to be in. They're only leeching off of you. So I don't recommend having people like that in your life. And yes, it might lead to those people leaving your life, but in the long run, ultimately, I believe that to be a better solution because I want you to live a better life. That being said, I'm not a huge fan of just ditching people in your life. I don't think that is the best way to go about it, but I am a big fan of compartmentalization. And what I mean by that is that, again, you meet people where they are. You don't tell yourself that they're something that they're not, and you're open to their true state. And you let people tell you and show you who and what they are. So you meet people where they are, and you also live your life with them in the context of who and what they are. Again, it's not reasonable for you to set expectations on them that they're not realistically ever gonna meet. Again, whether you find this relationship to be important enough for you to try and enforce those expectations, that's really up to you to decide. And if it is one of those relationships, then you can only communicate those expectations and enforce those expectations. And a possibility of enforcement is the outcome of separation. Because if both parties cannot find common ground in terms of where both are happy, then the relationship in its current form doesn't have a future. And again, that's not to say people can't change and you can't work it out. But again, I think truth is really the only way to navigate these situations forward. Obviously, you shouldn't, again, assume that you know everything, that your values are absolute and the most refined ones, but there are certain truths that we can come to conclude to be true and that we conclude are not worth sacrificing. So whenever that is the case, we must confront those situations. So don't go through life pretending like everything's okay if it's not. Because again, this is another scenario where you will most likely find yourself going into a burnout. Now, moving into one of the most interesting aspects in terms of burnout, when and if it may occur as a result of a mental issue, is that you are running a software that is not functional. And by software, I mean your mind and everything and anything that it entails. Your worldview, your values, your focuses, all of these things, when brought together, form a software that we are running in our minds. Now, a big part of this is expectations. Expectations are pretty much the output focus of this mental software that we're running. So to change the expectations, we must revise the software. We cannot just expect our expectations to change without changing what forms those expectations. Now, at its core, there's your idea of yourself, who and what you are. There's your worldview, which is a very broad term, but your idea of how the world is and how it works, generally speaking, what people are like and what the nature of human beings is like. Then you would have your core values. So again, things that you think are, above all, worth focusing on in most situations in life. And behind those, importantly, there is meaning. So if you're going through life getting burned out because reality doesn't match the expectations you have, the software you're running inside of your head, that should be cause for pause and make you think, is it possible that I have some ideas that lead to some expectations that are perhaps dysfunctional, that are perhaps not correct? Because if you're unwilling to make that concession, then you are saying that your worldview is perfect. Your values are perfect. And if you find yourself thinking that, you should be very concerned and you should be very skeptical of that observation. Even the very wisest cannot get everything right. And a healthy amount of skepticism against your own ego and against your own hubris should always be present. Again, the truths that you've discovered to be true, even if you found them to be correct now, for the time being, at the very least, and that time could last until the end of your life, you should have a degree of willingness to look at other stuff as well. And I'm sure that with a bit of honesty and self-reflection, most of us can open the door to the possibility that we don't have it all figured out, that we are wrong about a bunch of things. And the more you can keep that door open in your life, the better your life is going to be. Just like when you try and meet people where they are, you should try and meet ideas where they are as well. You can't explore and you can't discuss ideas properly if you're bringing all of these expectations and fears and resistance into the exploration of those ideas, because then you cannot explore those ideas. You need to have sufficient modularity and openness when you're testing out new ideas. If you find that you're going through life and you're bumping into resistance and you're getting exhausted, you must be willing to assume that there is a better way of doing it. There's a better idea out there. And this is, of course, where some people will interject and say, well, what if my idea and my expectation and my values are better than what's transpiring in this situation? Should I sacrifice those and just go with the flow and figure out a way to manage or tolerate it? And to that, I would answer, no, I don't want you to sacrifice your values. Again, if there is something that you believe to be true and worthwhile upholding, then you need to have difficult conversations with these people in your life. And if there's something you know that they don't know, then yes, you should try and educate them on that topic and share the information and ask them to have a look at it and ask them what they think. Don't try and lecture them. Ask what it is that they think of this. And most importantly, tell them how you feel. Tell them what's bothering you and what are the reasons why it's bothering you. I think if you're authentic about that and don't try and manipulate them straight into a different sort of a behavior, just tell them what's bothering you and why and what are the reasons behind that. And I think most people will be very receptive to your perspective. And then if they are open to that, then you can share the resources, you can share the information, you can educate them. And most importantly, keep in mind what is the end result that you're aiming for, and that it most likely is a better shared existence with that person. It's not that you get to win because your idea was better, but it's because you want to have a better life with this person, whatever context this may be, in business, friendship, romantic, with a parent, with a child. It doesn't matter. Make it about your shared gains from this situation. Steer away from trying to win the argument and trying to win the outcome that you're after. Also, something that people might be going through in relation to mental burnout is the erosion of your identity, that you become so enslaved to your responsibilities and the things you want to do or need to do in your life that you sort of lose yourself in that entire process. And this is where you have to make time for yourself. This is when you need to reconnect with the things that light you up. And this kind of relates to something we've talked about earlier in the podcast, which is breaking patterns. Just do something different. And it sounds super simple and stupid, but you need to do different things from what you do in your day-to-day life. So many of us get stuck on rails. We go to work the same route, we eat the same things and buy those things from the same shop and watch the same shows, listen to the same podcasts. We go to the same places, we do the same things. Just going for a walk in a different part of the city, going to work in a different way, taking a different route, buying your food from a different place, cooking a different meal in a different place, even if you can. Go see a friend you haven't seen in a long while. I think breaking patterns physically is super important so that you get new kind of stimulus. If you go to the same places, you kind of stop seeing the places altogether. Your brain thinks, I know this street, I know this way, I don't need to look at anything. And that's when you get stuck in your own head. And through those different stimuli, those different environment change is such a big thing. We need to do an episode on this soon. But simply an environment shift will make you look around, make you be present in a way that you weren't before. It doesn't need to be even a different city. I'm sure there are many places in your city that you haven't ever been to. You haven't gone for a walk in that area. Of course, be safe. I don't know where you live. But even in your sort of vicinity, you can go to new places or take a walk to a different place. I'm continuously surprised by how powerful this is because I do go on walks whenever I can, and just doing a slight tweak on that path and seeing something new, like, oh, I didn't know there were houses behind those trees, or that there's this residential area here, or that there's a path from here that leads there. Those kind of things can be extremely valuable. And I recommend you go and have these experiences with your significant other if you have a person like that in your life. Because again, this sort of identity erosion is very strongly linked to our expectations that we have of the people who are closest to us in our lives. And that identity begins to erode when we don't feel recognized, when we don't feel valued, when we don't feel appreciated. So it's important for you to throw yourself in a different environment with the person who is the most important person to you in your life, at least outside of your kids, let's say. And the person who affirms your identity the most, and perhaps the person who sees you in your full complexity more than anyone else. So go into different environments and do different things. Doesn't need to be anything fancy. Like I said, go and walk in a place where you haven't before, go to a shop, grab, an ice cream, a sandwich. I don't recommend either of those things, but there you go. Go grab a snack and walk in a different place and talk about shit. Another super important thing to consider is we tend to mentally burn out when we don't see the results that we are expecting, which is kind of understandable in a sense. This is a big one for me because I feel like I'm doing a lot of things that aren't particularly bearing a lot of fruit right now. I know pretty much everything and anything I do in life is a long game. And while I know that it's the correct thing for me to do in life, it still makes it very tough because the positive feedback can be very minimal or it can be slow. And that can be tough, especially when you are in tough situations or tough spots in your life and you wonder, what's the point in anything? And while I do think the long play is the right thing to do, the fact remains that we do need to experience small wins. And again, this is one of the things that I think creatives really suffer from because we tend to be perfectionists and we also tend to have these big, grandiose ideas of big projects, but then we never get them done. So it's a tough thing to get a win. Or you get it done, but it took you 5 or 7 years and the output of it isn't exactly as good as you thought it was. And now you find yourself thinking, do I suck? Should I ditch this creative thing altogether? And instead of approaching things from this angle, I recommend that you structure your life and your projects in such a way that you get small wins continuously. And again, I'm lecturing to myself, not that I'm lecturing to you per se, but this is something I really need to embrace more in my life because again, I tend to be leaning to that kind of big project, big output kind of a thing, even when I know that it doesn't work the way that I expect it to. And also I have a bit of a difficulty with time, which we'll come to after this point. But you should structure your every single day in such a way that you get small wins. Now, this takes humility because small wins are small wins. They're not big. So you need to be humble in the face of those smaller wins. But from experience, I can tell, although I do not currently occupy this position, but I have in the past, once you get the ball rolling and you figure out the unit of a day and you structure it in such a way that you get stuff done continuously and get these small wins throughout the day, when that train gets going, it feels so good when it's going. And when you do that, you begin to see the fruits of your labor compound. And in a few weeks, you begin to see that you are laying a brick each and every single day to build this wall and eventually to build this building, that the small wins sort of perceptually fade away. And instead, you just have this sort of continuous perception of winning all the time. I don't want to sound like a certain politician here, but in terms of winning, I mean you getting closer to the outcomes in life that you want to see. And I say that because a lot of people are very uncomfortable with this sort of terminology. A lot of people don't want to think about winners and losers because that's uncomfortable. And fundamentally, I think it's coming from a good place because we don't want to see other people fall behind. Every single one of us in our lives have been losers in some regard, in at least in some phase of our life or in certain situations in our life. And because we don't want that to be a possibility for us, we would rather deny the concept altogether. And then, of course, on top of that, there are people who are caring and they see that other people are not doing well in life and they don't want those people to be labeled as losers because maybe that means that they're going to stay in the hole that they are for even longer or they're just going to go deeper. And I think this conversation gets way too connotationally involved because where do we use those terms? We use those terms in the context of games in most cases. It could be a game of football or soccer or ice hockey. It could be a video game. There are certain rules. And against those rules, people are either moving towards the results that make you the winner of that game or it makes you the loser of that game. And in life, you're either moving closer to the winning conditions that you have set for yourself. Hopefully you have set some of those for yourself, or you're moving further away from that. And I think it's useful to think about these winning, losing terms from that perspective. Move away from those social connotations and focus on outcomes. Are outcomes aligning with what I want to see in my life, or are they not? But I think it's beneficial for anyone and everyone to go through life having positive experiences in their life, not just once a year, not once a month, not once a week, but preferably every single day. Now, that is really difficult to do, which takes some engineering from your part. You need to structure your tasks in a day in such a way that it makes those wins possible. And this is where the humility comes in play, because sometimes the tasks need to be really, really, really tiny so that you can actually achieve them and therefore set a winning condition to be something that is actually achievable. And remember, you define the winning condition, but it takes humility to make it simple and small enough that you can actually achieve it daily. So humility is the key, because you'll probably find that once you're writing down your winning condition for the day, it's probably going to be something very small. You might even consider it to be pathetic. And that's okay, because it's better for you to leave this day and enter the next one being a winner in your mind. I don't mean like these societal standards or as defined by this or that politician or your favorite influencer or podcast host. I mean, as defined by you. Again, you need to focus on yourself and stop focusing on how other people define these things for you. You set your winning condition for the day and you make it so that you can actually achieve it. And over time, that winning condition can become bigger and better. And if you can do this, this is a very great sign of maturity, practical maturity, knowing just how short one single day is and how little you can really achieve. in a day. And this can be tough for us creatives because we've all had those sessions where we made massive progress on a single day. We're composing music and we made like 3 or 5 tracks in a day, or at least you wrote the brunt of them in a day. And then you sort of fall into a slump because, hey, there was a bit of a creative mental burnout there, probably. Or you were studying for a test and you pulled an all-nighter and you absorbed an incredible amount of information in just a few hours. And maybe you held that information for, who knows, maybe a day or 2, if even that. But we know we're capable of pulling off quite extraordinary feats. And we think that that's manageable and sustainable in the long run, every single day. But in reality, for most of us, in most conditions, it's not. And I think if it is possible, it's due to this gradual process of getting the small wins every single day and building up your capability every single day so that you can keep taking on bigger and bigger tasks and you get more competent and more confident because you've been winning for such a long time. You've been achieving your winning conditions as defined and set by you. Now, moving into burnout from the perspective of time. Again, this is very much linked to expectations. This is a big issue of mine because throughout my entire life, I've had a very contentious relationship with time. I've always felt like there is not enough of it. I mean, I've always found the unit of the day to be a very strange thing and very completely insufficient. Always finding myself lying in bed feeling like the day should be longer because now I have all these ideas and energy and I want to output them. And then when you actually want to do things or could do things, you're running out of time. And then when you're doing things that you don't want to do, time is not moving at all at the pace you want. And of course, this is very much a perceptual issue. And it's also an issue of lack of skills of deploying yourself when and where you need to. Because oftentimes we want life, again, to happen on our terms. We want things to go the way we want them to go. So when you do have 3 hours to compose, you're like, well, I don't feel like doing that now. Well, tough luck. And again, I think that's a lack of maturity in terms of being a creative professional, because I think there are tools that we can deploy to do what we need to do whenever we have the opportunity to do it. But when I think about time now as an issue in terms of how it relates to a burnout of not feeling like you have enough time, obviously we have 2 kids now. So, you wake up, you have breakfast with them. You obviously got to take care of that for them, take them to daycare. Then you go do your own job and you only have a certain amount of hours for that. And then if you want to be any significant part of their life, you got to go back home at some kind of a reasonable hour. And then you might feel like you didn't have enough time for your work. And then when you're with your kids, you might feel like you didn't have enough time for your kids. And then you need to get ready for your evening stuff. And then in my case, because my health is whatever it is, I need to be in bed early so that I can get sufficient sleep. And also the kids need to get their sleep as well. But excess time is simply something that I don't, for example, have in my life right now at all. And to be clear, I love doing all these things in my life. I'm very blessed and very lucky to have everything that I have in my life. Maybe I'm not so grateful about the health issues, but again, I'm trying to even look at that from some kind of a more constructive perspective. But again, being a recovering perfectionist and just wanting to do more, be better, I don't feel like I have enough time for the things in my life, which is 100% a mindset issue. None of us can make the day longer than it is. All of us have those 24 hours, but we can all certainly become more efficient. We can cut the excess out of our lives. We can be more efficient. We can be less wasteful with our time. We can improve our work processes to become more efficient. We can take care of ourselves in terms of eating, sleeping better, so we have more energy so that we can be more effective and do more. We can become better at time management. We can schedule our days better. We can learn to focus on the right things. That's a big one for me because having the brain that I do, I can find it difficult to gather my focus. Once I do, it's far better than most people's, but getting to that point can be challenging. The main thing here is that if you're like me and you find yourself having a certain bitterness and resentment towards time itself and the limited amount that we seem to have of it, there's nothing you can do about that. And with anything and everything in life that you cannot change, you must come to acknowledge and accept. And that's really the only way to transcend any limitation in life. And I think time might be my next frontier in terms of this, because there are many things that I've, so to speak, transcended. There are many things in life that you, as a limited human being, can do absolutely nothing about. But when we confront, acknowledge, and accept something, we begin to see other possibilities. And most importantly, we begin to see other perspectives that we didn't see before, because we were so obsessed about denying this one truth that we didn't see other ways of looking at that truth. So when you confront, acknowledge, and accept something, you become free of that obsessive hold, of that obsessive expectation of what that thing is. And you can begin to see other ways of looking at that limitation. And from those perspectives, you can see that, in fact, those limitations didn't matter at all from these new vantage points. And this sort of links to those small wins that we talked about, because again, I cannot make more hours. I can become better with my time. I can become better with my skills as they relate to being with the family or doing my work. I can be more efficient and effective in all of those things. But beyond that, I must accept the unit of the day and face it with openness. Again, going back to trying to meet people where they are, I need to teach myself how to meet time where it is and in the form that it is. Even if my internal clock runs differently or wants to run differently, and I want the day to be longer, I want there to be more time, there isn't. So if I can meet the unit of the day and meet time as a whole, where it actually is, I'll probably be able to make the most of it, make more out of it. And being content with the time that I have will most likely result in a better ability to interface with it more effectively. Last point is that we can only ever do our best. Setting unreasonable expectations beyond that is not healthy. We are human. We want to be more than we are. It's natural. In some ways, it's respectable and commendable. But again, learning to confront the things that we cannot change is essential for growth. It sounds very counterintuitive, but like we talked about, you must set yourself free from the expectation. For you to expect yourself to be able to do more than what you can reasonably do in any given time frame is setting yourself up for failure. Confront, acknowledge, and accept the realities of life and do your best within those parameters. Learn more, become more effective, more efficient, more open, and make achieving winning conditions as set by you. Make it achievable on a daily basis. Don't set yourself up for failure by making your goals too lofty. And then when it takes too long and it's too difficult, you think you're some sort of a failure. Simply the context window is wrong. So make your winning conditions achievable on a daily basis. And that means making them small enough. And as you do that for a long enough time period, it's impossible not to feel good about yourself, because day in, day out, you are succeeding in your life as defined by you. And if you do that, then you're doing your best. And also be realistic about what doing your best means and what it looks like. We're only human. We always overestimate what we can do in a short time frame, and we always underestimate what we can do in a longer time frame. So if you're really doing all these steps, then you are doing your best. And if you're doing your best, all things considered, that's all we can do. And that is a reasonable expectation to have. And when our expectations align with our life, it becomes very difficult to mentally burn out. That's it for this episode. If you want to support the podcast, consider leaving it a rating wherever you may be listening to it. If you want to be an even bigger supporter of this podcast, consider joining my membership program. It's like my own Patreon, but it's just way better. It's by far the best way to support me as well as connect with me directly. So if you want to become one of the MVPs of this podcast and also everything else that I do, consider getting yourself a membership. And also, if you want to do a one-to-one coaching session with me, go to my website and you can book those from there. As always, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Finished.